Hello and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick with the City of Hampton's Communications and Marketing Department. And today, one of my frequent guests is Alvean Lyons. Welcome back.
Good morning.
And we're going to talk about money.
Mm-hmm.
And this is such a big topic. You're going to come back and we're going to talk about it again and
We're going to do it 3 times. Yes.
Why is it so hard? Why is it so hard to talk about money?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with how we relate to money. Personally, so many of us come into our relationships, both as partners and as parents, even our professional lives, with feelings about our value relative to money. You watch your parents work their whole lives in order to be able to afford certain things for you. You watch them struggle to go through retirement sometimes in some situations. You watch them struggle to determine what's going to happen for care when they're older. The process, even when we're young, looking at this trajectory, makes it so that we have some really deep feelings about it. And emotions in the money conversation run so tightly aligned.
So some of it is the money. It's making the choices of what you have and how you spend it. But more of it really is that the bigger picture, that how it makes you feel.
Personal.
And what it says
Yes.
about how you feel about the other person, how you feel about
Absolutely.
your family, what those choices are.
Absolutely. And you can't separate yourself from those experiences because we are the combination of our experiences. So when we walk into those other relationships, we are taking all of that with us. So whatever it is that we're feeling about money before we become partners and before we become parents, we have to examine what those are. Figure out what our own value systems are surrounding them. Does it make us anxious to have the conversation? Do we have a script in our heads that say if I say certain things or if I feel a certain way, I'll be judged about that, or I don't know the right things to say, or I have the wrong orientation to these things? All of our internal feelings about money generally and almost consistently come out in our interactions with anyone else about it.
So how do you do that? How do you even, I'll tell you a story. I was so poor, like we were, poor, but we were like farm, rural, homesteading kind of poor.
Got it.
But I remember when I graduated from college, I would not buy bread because you make bread from scratch, mayonnaise, or yogurt. And so I just mostly didn't eat those things because I was working full time and I didn't always have time. But it's like, it took me this long time to realize I have a salary now, I could buy things. I don't have to make everything from scratch. But it's so embedded, you don't really even see it.
It's so true. And you're not alone in that. I have very good friends, actually one of my closest friends. I will leave her nameless since we're on television. But one of my closest friends, when we were in school together, she would never take off the price tags off of things. Always prepared that if necessary, I could return it. And we had a very, very deep and profound conversation once, and she said to me, because when I was younger, we struggled with having enough to do everything that I really wished we could have done, I'm always prepared for the possibility that I may need to give up something in order to do something that I need. Wow. And it took her years to be able to move past that space. And now she's extremely successful, wonderful mom, wonderful wife, the whole 9 yards. But it took years before she could shake what it was that she grew up experiencing. So the reality is, for all of us, we come into this experience with what it was that was scripted for us when we were young. Did we come from an environment with abundance and the free ability to purchase things whenever we wanted and so on and so forth? Or did we come from an environment where there just was often not enough? So we had to be extremely frugal. And that frugality turns into, depending upon how we examine it, may turn into some fears about not having enough.
Yeah, it's very real. And you just don't even know what's going on in there.
Absolutely.
So how do you figure it out?
Okay.
How do you learn to talk? That's the first step.
It's quite a process, and it's not a linear one. So to think that just all of a sudden, after hearing our brilliant conversation today, that you're just going to step away and say, I can do these 20 things automatically would be unrealistic. But to sit down, and I mean with nobody else, to think about, when I think about money, what feelings come to mind? You can write them down if you're a little bit more diligent in the process. So sitting down with a piece of paper and a pen and saying those, asking yourself the question. And what are the words that come to mind? Don't worry about it being perfect. Don't worry about what you should say. Examine what really comes natural to you. I get nervous. I'm concerned about not having enough. I want my kids to have more than I had. When I was young, I wasn't allowed to do these things, so I feel this way about money. Examine what it is that you're coming into the experience with, because it'll have a lot to do with how you're going to relate to everyone else relative to the same thing. So it starts with the personal identification. Where do I fit in this money conversation? How do I feel about the process? And what might I need to do about it? But if you don't know where you are, it's like a map in the mall. You are here. So you look for that X. If you don't know where you are, you have no idea where you're going to go in the conversations.
Right. And I think, one of the things that makes people nervous a lot of times is debt. Like, what will I borrow for? What won't I borrow for? Or am I just so nervous about the concept of the future that I can't even get to a calm discussion of that? It is. It's about how do you get over the feelings.
Absolutely. And that's really interesting that you would say debt, because that's an enormous thing. I mean, it's the American conversation. Us as a nation,
right now,
us individually.
yes.
I mean, debt is huge. But determining what is good debt and what is bad debt has a lot to do with our value system. And that's not something somebody else can tell you. You have to figure out, does it make sense to take out the loan for an education? Is that a good investment? And in general, the conversation around good debt is it a good investment? Will it produce the opportunity for more?
Right.
If it's not going to produce more, it's generally considered bad debt because it is taking away your assets as opposed to creating the opportunity for new assets. So generally people would say education, investing in a house, and those kinds of things would make more sense in terms of debt. But buying an expensive car unnecessarily and going on the shopping spree and putting that on your credit card,
Right.
those kinds of things, high interest, you are spending more in interest than you are making by virtue of what it is that you are purchasing. So that is generally not considered by most people good debt. So it also connects to our value systems. What do we want from life? What are we willing to invest in order to get it? And what things are going to be the appropriate avenues to get there? And all of those things surround the conversations that we have first internally and then externally.
Wow. Now, how do you, but really, like, do you have some steps? Are there classes? I mean, what can you do just to get comfortable or even to understand where you are? Maybe you're not even comfortable with it, but until you know what you're carrying into that discussion, you can't have it. You can't get anywhere.
It is challenging. It's very challenging. And there are not always specific classes that are going to help you examine the internal stuff. I cannot honestly tell you of some that I know of locally that will help you examine the internal stuff. So that's going to be some of your personal work. But there are certainly things as we start moving into the parenting part and the partnership component of it all that we certainly can utilize, just learning how to have conversation. Like, for instance, YEF has some great programs on building better relationships. That's all in the conversations that we're having. Learning how to win without fighting. And because I always think about how cool it would be to fight and win, I tend to want to change the name of it, but it is win without fighting. And I love the idea of being able to have a conversation where we may have very different perspectives about things, particularly when we're talking about it with partners and our children, and learn how to do that in a way that does not have to come with the ugly emotion and the fighting that really becomes stalemates. We're not even connecting anymore when that happens.
Right.
So that kind of conversation is helpful as well. And there are several in there, and I won't give all the names just for sake of time, so that you certainly can check it out on the Healthy Families website and YEF as well.
When you say YEF, we don't do acronyms here.
I'm sorry. You're right. Youth Education and Family Services.
Okay, so one of the City of Hampton's departments and programs.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Sorry, it's so loving for all of us. I apologize to the public, but yes, if you go to the websites, there are lots of programs that they do, generally within 2 to 3 of them generally within a quarter or so. Some of the classes last 12 weeks, but when we start to get into the summertime, they do some very brief ones that are like their hot topics.
And I'm sure this is, well, anything, learning to communicate.
Absolutely.
Whatever the name of the course is, it's really also about having that structured time. Because if you're just fighting about, I want to buy the new TV, I don't want to buy the new TV,
right.
You don't get necessarily the bigger discussion unless someone kind of pushes you into that.
It's true, and helps to facilitate the process. Agreed. And it definitely helps to facilitate the process. Their goal is to help equip us as families, regardless of what that family structure necessarily looks like, but who we are as families, to be able to do the work that's necessary to be successful. We need to learn how to do some things that we may not be doing. And if we're doing them well, we can do them better. Mm-hmm. So it's not just about whether you have a deficiency, do you participate in these opportunities for growth, but do you have a desire to do what you're doing even better than you're doing it today? And those programs and those classes and workshops, they all give us an opportunity to focus on some of the things that we may not be thinking about very often. So I'm a huge advocate for it because I know how much communication and building effective relationships underpins our success as families. So we get to move from the individual work that we have to do to the collective work that's really at the foundation of the success of us as families.
And I will say most of these programs are free. Mm-hmm. And absolutely. A lot of them provide childcare. So
yes,
that,
they do.
It's almost like a date night.
It really is. It can be.
You get somebody to take care of your kid, you have a chance to have this conversation, and even though it might be really painful, you come out of it a little bit stronger.
Agreed. And the word that we were talking about before in terms of investment, investments aren't always just about money.
There you go.
Sometimes they're about time. So investing in your family, investing in yourself by dedicating the time to really focus on the things that make us stronger is a wonderful way to use your time. Wonderful way to do it.
That's great. That's great. Okay, now speaking of time, we're going to have to wrap this one up, but we are going to come back and talk about some more specific things with our partners and with our children.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you, Alvean. I appreciate it. And thank you for watching. I hope you are ready to begin having a conversation first with yourself and then with your family about money issues and how they make you feel. Thank you.